when you manage your career, it's like managing a financial portfolio. When you manage a financial portfolio, you don't put all your eggs in one basket. You don't put it all into a fixed deposit or into certain stocks and bonds. No, you actually have a balanced basket so that you are also managing your risks. With careers, I encourage people to think of careers in that way too. Today, the world is going to only become more and more volatile and more dynamic. Having employees who understand that, have the skills, the agility, and the mental capacity to be able to stretch is incredibly important. And we have to build that in our organizational ecosystem to build that muscle so that our employees will have the ability to grow in their careers beyond the linear.
Welcome to the HR Impact Show, where we have honest conversations with global people leaders about their journey in building great workplaces. I'm your host, Dorothy Yu, co-founder and CEO of Engage Rocket. Engage Rocket is a technology and advisory company that leverages on data to enhance employee experience from hire to retire. Today, I'm excited to have Vanessa Teo with us. Vanessa is the Senior VP of Global HR at ST Engineering. Besides her day job at ST Engineering, she's also a co-host of her own podcast called Career Transitions. She's also a mentor at various programs at NUS, National University of Singapore, as well as an advocate for inclusion. Today, we'll delve into her experience and as well as her thought leadership on various topics, such as diversity, equity, and inclusion, talent management, as well as her thoughts around building the next generation of leaders. Welcome to the show, Vanessa. Happy to have you here. So you have had a very interesting career journey that's spanned across 20 years. And I know, as a matter of fact, that you didn't even start out in the beginning in HR. So for the audience that may not know you very well, could you maybe just tell us more about your journey?
Well, thanks for having me. I started my career actually in the US. And you're right, I started my career actually in the commercial space, in merchandising, in fact. So I joined a large US retailer right out of college, and I absolutely enjoyed the whole merchandising space. So I ended up starting my career with Target, and over the course of time, made a number of international moves with Target. So while I enjoyed the merchandising space, I also had a sense of adventure when it came to my career. When opportunities opened up in Asia, I raised my hand and I said, I'd love to take on those opportunities. So an opportunity actually opened up in China. So I moved to China and I took on, in fact, a role that was in the training space, but it very quickly evolved into HR. I was asked by the head of HR if I would consider taking on a role to lead HR in China. At first, I was thinking, okay, I have no idea how HR works, but I have always been a consumer of HR services, so I'll give it a shot. And I thought, you know what, let's do this for maybe 2 years and I'll make another cross-functional move back to the business. But what became a 2-year experience actually ended up expanding over time, and I loved the HR space, and I continued then the rest of my career taking on different roles in HR. I made a few international moves, spending time in Indonesia, sometime here in Singapore, part of my career also in Hong Kong. And then I ended up moving back here to Singapore, where I then took on other HR roles in different cross-functional roles within HR. So yeah, it's been an incredible journey just seeing different parts of the world and also seeing different parts of HR.
So you actually never went back to the business side. You stayed on with the opportunity to become head of HR and then just stayed
Yeah.
on in HR.
I actually did a cross-functional move later in career. So a couple years ago, I had the opportunity, in fact, to move back into the business. And I did a role that was the head of strategy, and it was a chief of staff role in the last organization I was at. It was a pharmaceutical organization. And I had the opportunity actually to move back into a business role as the chief of staff to our commercial head for Asia Pacific. And I leapt at that opportunity because I felt it was a great opportunity again to test my skills back in the business. And in fact, you take a lot of the skills that you learn, that I had learned through the years in HR, being a business partner, understanding where the business was going, and translating those skills back into the business space. And it was super energizing, but it was also one of the biggest stretches of my career because moving after so many years in HR back into the business required me to learn that business side again. I had to understand how I leveraged on all of my different stakeholders who had known me by that point as an HR professional. But I had to restart some of those other relationships to really get back into the space of being a commercial leader again.
When I was listening to you talk about your journey, and something that really stuck with me is how you're always learning, unlearning, relearning, right? Jumping countries, moving to different culture and environment, and then switching from a commercial role to HR, back to a commercial role, then now back to HR. Were there any key takeaways that you had or standout experiences that you had that you felt was pivotal to you?
I think my two moves that were cross-functional in nature, moving from the commercial space into HR, and then later on when I moved from HR into the commercial space, were two very important and pivotal moments in my career. Why? Because when you make a cross-functional move and you move between a business role and a functional role like HR, you have to be able to be open to the ambiguity. You're not an expert when you enter into a new role. And it's really learning quickly, recognizing that there are going to be times where I'm not going to be the smartest person in the room. And there will be opportunities that there will be times where I will make a mistake because of that lack of that domain knowledge. But what those two cross-functional experiences did for me was that it really challenged my way of thinking about careers. It challenged me to always think about how I'm reinventing myself, how I'm learning in ambiguous spaces, and very importantly, surrounding myself with tools, resources, and very importantly, networks of people who can help me to be successful because I cannot simply do it on my own. So when I did those cross-functional moves, it also taught me that I will not always get it right. I will make a mistake. But helping to mitigate some of those risks, I surround myself with people who might be better subject matter experts than I am. And I leverage on their experiences. I leverage on their networks to help me to make better decisions and help me to be more successful.
It really sounds like a bit of mentorship as well. And you yourself, you are also a mentor in various programs within, I think, National University of Singapore. So, what would you say to people who are either seeking out mentors? How do they approach that in this network? How do they build this network? And how do they make use of? Because sometimes it's not only about finding that individual who is willing to mentor you, but also making the best of both the mentor's time and your own time. So, what are your thoughts around that?
I think when you're seeking out a mentor, you've got to know what you want to get out of that relationship. Mentors at different stages in career and life may serve different purposes. And so I think when you seek out a mentor, first understand what you're trying to accomplish. What do you want that mentor to be able to help you with? And to be able to understand how you go about getting a great mentor, it starts with, of course, maybe within your own organization, really seeking out people who you might admire, people who might do things in a way that you feel you can learn from. There are also industry networks that you can to be a part of and establish those relationships and being bold and asking someone if they might be available and might be helpful for your growth to be a mentor to you. I think mentors are incredibly helpful to you. They challenge your way of thinking because they have probably walked through that path as well. They understand where some of those pitfalls might be. And I think that they bring a level of wisdom to helping you to make better decisions. One of my best mentors came when I made that cross-functional move, when I first moved from the commercial space into HR. And that individual was the managing director at that time of the office. And when I first moved into HR, I can tell you I knew nothing about China HR, other than being a consumer of HR services. But what this managing director said to me was, he said to me, Don't worry. I know it will be tough, but I will support you. And throughout my time with him as his HR leader, he gave me tremendous level of support. He helped point me in directions that would lead to better decisions and more successful outcomes. And he also pointed out where pitfalls and landmines might be. And that was incredibly helpful because he came with the understanding, with the wisdom, and was very willing to point me in the right direction.
Amazing. But I think that's also a lot because you were willing to be challenged, right? We have that open-mindedness to not just listen, but also challenge your own perspective or my true north might not be right. So staying on the topic of career, so you also have a
Yeah.
podcast that you co-host called Career Transitions. So
Yes.
audience, listeners out there, do check it out. Based on the stories that you've heard, and these are people who have made career switches in their life, what are some traits or key success factors that can actually help them adjust?
So, through the course of our podcast, we actually discovered 3 themes that are very relevant in careers. The first is about how you go about seeing your career as you would a financial portfolio. The second is the importance of your network. And we think of it as your network being your net worth. And the third, I would say, is really having a deep sense of curiosity and that continuous learning. So let me talk about each one. So the first one on seeing your career as a financial portfolio. What we see in successful individuals who make career transitions are individuals who recognize that when you manage your career, it's like managing a financial portfolio. When you manage a financial portfolio, you don't put all your eggs in one basket. You don't put it all into a fixed deposit or into certain stocks and bonds. No, you actually have a balanced basket so that you are also managing your risks. With careers, I encourage people to think of careers in that way too. Because when you think of your career as a portfolio, you recognize that there's a diversity of skills that you need to develop throughout your career. So, diversity of skills and experience are collected over time. You think of your experiences, whether it's a cross functional experience or whether it's a global experience, these all form parts of your portfolio. It could also be pursuing of experiments like you would with a challenging project, or you collect an experience perhaps when you pursue a passion project. All of these form a portfolio of skills, which I think is super important in your career. The second point that we found in successful individuals is this piece about your network. And what I mean by network is thinking of your network as your net worth. Your network is made up of individuals who come from all walks of life. They could be your mentors, it could be your stakeholders at work, it could be your former bosses, it could be your industry peers. All of these individuals form that network. How diverse is that network? Are you able to call on your network when in times of need? Networks take time to develop. They need to be harnessed and cultivated over time. And you need to recognize where each one of your networks play in your life. Your network is important in both your personal as well as your career, but they help you ultimately to have almost like a board of directors who understand you and who can help to give you advice in times of need. The third one I would say is that continuous learning. And what we found in successful individuals is this deep sense of curiosity to always be asking the questions of how can I do things better? What do I need to learn to change the way I'm thinking about things? How do I look at relearning a skill? How do I look at reinventing the way I might think about a problem? And individuals who are successful tend to think of this process less of a daunting experience of trying to learn something new, but they always look at how they can learn it better. How can they reframe a problem to turn it into a learning opportunity? And I think that those are the 3 things that we see throughout our podcast about how people make successful career transitions and ultimately what helps to build successful careers.
Have you heard of any effective strategy in maintaining or building this network? Because it takes effort,
Yeah.
right? It takes courage to ask someone, do you mind spending an hour with
Yeah.
me? So, any practical tips? So, that's my first question. Maybe we can start there.
Let me start with some practical ones and perhaps ones that might be closer than what you think. So, one of the networks that's very close to you are your networks first at the workplace. Think about people you interact with on a daily basis. Who are these people who you feel you admire in some way? It doesn't have to be everything that they do, but it could be some aspect of their work that is a real standout for you. I would say reach out to those individuals. Could you have coffee with them? Could you have a meal with them? I always think that when you sit down outside of the office and you have a cup of coffee with someone, or when you have lunch with someone, it builds a very different level of connection. I would start there, a coffee, a lunch with someone within your network. But it's all right to step out of your comfort zone and have lunch with someone you don't necessarily always have lunch with. I always think about what's my in with that person. And I always try to start with that in. Could the in with that person be the type of work that we're working on together? Could it be their family situation? Maybe they have kids around my same age. I always start with that because it forms a connection with the individual. It could be a love for a hobby that we share together. And I would start with those things to help build some of that connections. So that's one, starting with an easier way of building the network. I would also challenge people to sometimes be a bit bolder. Individuals are on social network, and one of them that we're always on, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great marketplace where you make connections, and there are some that will be deeper than others. But on LinkedIn, you sometimes see individuals who you do admire for various things, perhaps some things that they've done in career. And one of the things that we did in our podcast is that we started to look out for these people and drop them an email, drop them a LinkedIn mail to say, I really liked what you did. And I saw your post on this. Would you consider having a virtual chat with me about these particular topics? And in fact, those were how we landed up with some of our guests on our podcast. It was through making some of these connections that got us really interested about human beings. And we reached out with a deep sense of curiosity to what those people are doing. It has helped us to build that network. And the network doesn't just happen with one meeting. It needs to be cultivated over time. And there are individuals that you will find having a deeper connection than others. And I would keep up with those connections, call them out for coffee, lunch, or sometimes just a text
Yeah.
to stay in touch.
Actually, the power of the network is that even in my own journey in building my own network, is that every connection that you have made at the end of the session, it might open another door,
Yes,
right? Oh, maybe you should talk to this person or that person. And then all of a sudden, it's not one connection, it's then times three, right? So I think that's also that power. And the other thing that I find helpful is also finding how can you also add value to the connection you've just made, right? Is there any
absolutely.
favor I can do for you? 'Cause-
Yes,
So then it's not all of a sudden just I'm taking from the
yes,
connection, but I'm also giving back.
yes.
So Vanessa, I'm very curious, as head of HR, what are some of the biggest people agenda you're working on?
One, I think, is elevating the employee experience. And two, I think it's helping our workforce to be future ready. So maybe I'll talk about the first one about elevating the employee experience. We operate in a very competitive employment market, and employees have different choices that they can make with their careers. What I want people to feel is that the choice that they make with our organization is the best choice that they'll be able to make. And so, what this means is helping to elevate the employee experience, whether it means building a greater sense of inclusion and belonging and diversity, or whether it means helping individuals to find that this is a place where they can build careers. I think all of these things are super important as we think about how we make our organization a great place to work. The second piece I think is really important for our organization, and I would say for most organizations, is how do you prepare your workforce for the future of work? So much is happening in the space of technology and AI, and so much of that will change the way that we think about work and how people are ready or not ready for that will define the future of organizations. So the other aspect is how do we upskill our organization with the relevant skills for our employees, but also helping employees and leaders to also recognize what are the skills that will not be going away. Skills around communication, skills around coaching and developing of others, skills around building diversity in careers. All of these will not go away, but they will need to be elevated over time. So these are the things that we're working on now.
So I definitely want to double click on the future of work topic. But before I move there, I want to also touch on DEI because I know you're a big supporter of DEI. You're also a mother of two neurodivergent children, and I have a child with special needs. So I think we both connected
Yeah.
also on our passion on this topic. At the workplace, some people think of DEI as more fluffy, but some actually sees very tangible
Mm.
business impact.
Yes.
What is your experience?
Creating a workplace that is diverse and inclusive has so many benefits to organizations. It leads to an organization that is more empathetic, more compassionate, but it also leads to much better decision making because you are thinking about how you bring in different points of views into that decision making process. So I'll share a little bit. My two kids are dyslexic, and so they think differently. Dyslexics in general have challenges when it comes to reading and writing. So they are able to perform everything else in a very neurotypical way. But when it comes to reading and writing, they do tend to have challenges. In schools, they are provided with various accommodations, be it with assessments or be it in the classroom. They do receive some form of accommodations, and the teachers are aware and are able to provide different levels of support. Now, in the workplace, I see this as being increasingly important. In the workplace, we need to think of ways in which we are able to accommodate different ways of thinking and processing of information. So I'll speak specifically about dyslexics. Dyslexics, while they have challenges with reading and writing, but they are incredibly creative and innovative in the way that they process ideas and the way that they come to solutions. So being able to help them to overcome and provide the necessary accommodations with reading and writing will help them to then focus on what they're really great at, which is coming to the table with innovative, with creative thoughts. They're very strong when it comes to connecting the dots and coming up with solutions that sometimes might be unexpected. Today in the workplace, I think that there's so much in the technology space that will be able to help them, whether it is speech to text accommodations that can be made. There are technology tools that will also be able to help them. Generative AI has been a game changer. My children these days use ChatGPT to help them to write certain things. And I think it's incredible what we're able to do. I think at workplaces, what organizations can do even better at is really understanding how we go about bringing out the strengths in individuals rather than focusing only on what they're not great at. If we can reframe some of these thinking and perhaps offer up roles, projects, or even assignments that play to those individual strengths, I think you'll see incredible advantages that come through for organizations.
How do you measure DEI? Like, how do you track what is considered successful and what's considered not?
Well, of course, there are metrics that show you X percentage of individuals. But where I see DI really where the rubber hits the road is when we look at employee engagement, when we look at how much employees are telling us that this is the place to be, how much people are telling us that they feel that sense of belonging, they feel the sense that their managers are listening to them. These are indicators that also tell you how engaged your workforce is. How much do they believe in your organization? And when people feel that way, productivity increases. People feel that they're able to contribute more and they are able to bring their strengths into work. So I also would measure how leaders are perceived. How do our teams perceive our leadership team? What are things that our leaders do well? When we have great managers who support individuals on their teams, who listen to them, who understand deeply their strengths and their development needs, who spend time with their employees, you see those teams with a much greater level of engagement and ultimately in deliverables.
I couldn't agree more because that's absolutely everything that we stand for here at Engage Rocket. So a lot of what we do is also to help organization design the best employee listening strategies. And it might go beyond just the once a year or once in 2 years employee engagement survey, but to really supplement it with even more sentiment data exactly to allow the point of there's no one size fit all solution. So let's try to understand how the different segments within your organization, what their unique needs are, and then empower the managers who are so much closer
Yeah.
to the employees than
Yes.
HR is, right? So that
Yeah.
they can actually action and create impact on the ground. Okay, so now I'm going to switch gears a little bit to the future of work. And I'm curious to know, Vanessa, what, in your point of view, does the ideal workplace of the future look like?
So I think that organizations of the future will need to be focused on being purposeful and having a greater sense of diversity and inclusion. So let me talk about a couple of things. So the first one being purpose driven. I think increasingly organizations have to ask themselves, what are they doing to make themselves better for the world? And to not only have purpose driven statements, but more importantly, to have purpose driven activities and philosophy that will spread across the organization. Employees have to know that what they're doing not only contributes to the today, but also in the work that they do, it contributes to creating a better world and better future for everyone. I think that's where employees are going to continue to feel that purpose and that drive to continue to do what they do. The second piece that I think will continue to be really important is this whole piece on creating a diverse and inclusive workspace. We're only going to have a greater diversity in our workforce. When you think about the multi-generational workforce that we're going to have, when you think about gender diversity, and you think about neurodiversity as well, these are going to not only be an optional thing for organizations to consider, but it has to be a part of your organization's mission as well. Employees today will have so many options to choose from, different organizations where they're able to grow their careers. So, how does your organization stand out when it comes to purpose, when it comes to diversity, inclusion? And does their work ultimately build a better world? I think that's what the future of work is going to look like. Of course, I also think that workplaces will need to continue to evolve to help employees also build careers that will help them to be diverse in skill sets, to be agile, and to also be much more dynamic in the way that they pivot in business. Today, the world is going to only become more and more volatile and more dynamic. Having employees who understand that, have the skills, the agility, and the mental capacity to be able to stretch is incredibly important. And we have to build that in our organizational ecosystem to build that muscle so that our employees will have the ability to grow in their careers beyond the linear.
Where do you think HR stands in all of this? If you were to give HR professionals who may be listening to this a piece of advice on how to strive towards building such a workplace with diversity, with purpose, with learning agility, what would that advice be?
I go back to some of the things that help to build successful careers. And when you build successful careers, ultimately you build successful organizations. I think one of the most important things in HR that we have to learn as professionals is continuous learning and continuing to have a deep sense of curiosity about the world beyond us. I think about two aspects. One is learning of the hard skills that are going to help us in HR continue to be successful. So whether it is the latest technologies as it relates with artificial intelligence or whether it's relating to the newest technologies in HR, we have to be aware of what's out there. We've got to be able to have that curiosity to learn the new skills if we don't already possess them, but to also seek out opportunities in HR to get ourselves into those projects or those experiences so that it really builds that agility muscle in our brains.
So now I'll move on to the final segment, right? Where I'd love to ask you a couple more questions. So the first one is really around what is one thing you would want employees to understand more about HR?
I would love for employees to know that we're more than just policies and procedures, that deep inside of most HR professionals' heart, we do care about employees and we want to help employees to thrive in their careers, to make better decisions with careers, and ultimately help to build better organizations.
And as a very seasoned HR professional, is there a book that you would recommend to other HR professionals to read?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely love the book Working Identity by Aminia Ibarra. It was a book that was pivotal for me a few years ago. When I read this book, it was all about how we make career transitions. And when you make career transitions, it's not about making that one big bang move. But successful career transitions are often made by making those small incremental experiments, as she calls it, along the way, where you develop and you learn new skills, and it prepares you for those bigger moves. It was extremely inspirational for me, which was also what helped to inspire our podcast, Career Transitions. And it's really about making those small, bold, incremental moves.
Amazing. Okay, now I want to read that book.
Yes, you should.
And my next question is also around your core leadership philosophy. Is there one that you hold dear to your heart?
I love to build great teams. And what I love to be able to do is to be able to build great HR teams and empower great people on the team to do things that they are best at. I love when individuals take on roles within the HR organization. And when people love doing something that they do, you really see them thrive. My philosophy is to give those people the space, the autonomy to build on those strengths, and ultimately they bring their best game to the table.
Amazing. And my final question, what are you most excited about in 2025?
I am most excited about some work that I'm doing around workplace transformation. I'm really excited about where organizations and businesses are going to be transforming in the next year and years ahead. But I'm particularly excited about how we're going to be able to transform the workplace to be ready for all of these business challenges that will be coming our way.
Yeah.
So that's keeping me up at night. And I know that will be something that will continue to make a really positive impact to our people and to the organization.
The thing about transformation, it's change. It's just so much part of our ways of work now, right? And some of these transformation projects, we're talking about years.
Yes.
And this really brings me back to the point of why we are so passionate about what we do in Engage Rocket, to surface the data around how your employees are also doing through all these changes, because the world from a macro perspective is also changing. And then within the organization, there's also so much change. So these data on how then we can pull or help our employees to ride with us on a journey so they don't fall behind is also what keeps me up at night.
So now we know why we're both up late at night.
This has been the most meaningful and also inspirational and insightful conversation.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Vanessa.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
To our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. If you found the conversation valuable, do like and subscribe to our podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of your favorite podcast app. You can also learn more about the show and subscribe to our community at engagerocket.co/HR impact. I'll see you in the next episode.